Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Schroff, and I'm a Dean Student Ambassador to the UC Riverside School of Public Policy. I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's special event. A Generations Dialogue talk with General Barrye Price will be interviewed by Generations Dialogue Project Fellow Ms. Desiree Winns. But before we get started, I want to first briefly go over the format for this seminar. We'll devote the first part of today's events to a conversation between our special guest. Then we reserve some time for an audience Q&A. In addition to a Zoom audience, we also have an in-person watch party on the UCR campus. We have a live feed of our attendees. For online attendees participating in the Spirit of Giving raffle, there will be a link before the webinar ends. Now, without further ado, I'm honored to introduce our two guests for today's event. First, we have Desiree Winns. A former film student, Desiree received her bachelor's in political science from the University of Central Florida in 2022. After living in Hong Kong during the 2020 protest, she gained an interest in the studies of democracy and authoritarianism. Since enrolling for her master's in international affairs at George Washington University, she has been selected for the U.S. Institute of Peace Mentorship, the Generations Dialogue Fellowship, the Woman of Color Advancing Peace and Security Fellowship. After graduating from George Washington University in 2024, Desiree plans to continue her academic career with a PhD in political science. Next, I'm honored to introduce General Barrye Price. He is a 1985 distinguished military graduate of the University of Houston's College of Business Administration. He earned a Master of Arts degree in history from Texas A&M University in 1994, and in 1997, became the first African American to obtain a doctorate from the Department of History at Texas A&M University in 147 years. He also earned a Master of Science degree in National Security Strategy from the National Defense University in 2004. Major General Price received many personal honors during his Army career. These include the Army Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, 2 Legions of Merit, and the Bronze Star Medal. He is also entitled to wear the Army Staff Badge and the Airborne and Air Assault badges. Major General Price assumed his duties at Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, or CADCA, as the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer effective October 1st, 2016. He became the president and CEO of CADCA on September 1st, 2020. Welcome, Desiree and General Price.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for that great introduction, Sam. I'll go ahead and share my screen since I have a slideshow. Can everyone see? So as aforementioned, I'm a fellow with the Generations Dialogue Project based at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. First, since I'm based here in D.C., we just want to give a GW land acknowledgement. The George Washington University campus resides in the ancestral lands of the Piscataway and Anacostan people, and the Piscataway people still live in the DMV. So we wanted to give a quick acknowledgement to them first before we begin with our discussion for this evening. So a little introductory to the Generations Dialogue Project. It was co-authored by former Peace Corps Director Aaron S. Williams, Commodities Manager Taylor Jack, and George Washington University Professor Dr. Jennifer Brinkerhoff. The entire focus of the GDB project is to provide mentorship to young people of color who are interested in international affairs, but don't have much access or knowledge about what actually goes into international affairs. So we connect these younger generations with people who have experience in international affairs, these leaders and giants within that community, so they can learn more from people who have gone through that experience and they provide their own advice and mentorship to them. So we have a video as well to introduce the Generations Dialogue Project a bit further. So I will stop sharing my screen and Dr. Brinkerhoff will share hers to show the video.
America faces significant challenges today, too. And one of America's great strengths as we move forward is our diversity. And so I felt it was important to write a book that would give young people of color, African Americans, a chance to consider a career in global affairs.
Never to forget that our population is a population that helps to keep our country going, and that it's a diverse population, not a white population, a black population. And when I first became Director General, my personal staff was all white, and I'm sure they were waiting to see what I was going to do. And I called everyone in and said, I do not intend to supervise a white-owned staff here. So I'm going to bring in some other people who represent the other kinds of people that we need to have on our staff.
I'm Aaron Williams. I'm the former director of the Peace Corps during the Obama administration. I'm also a retired Foreign Service officer. I served 22 years with the U.S. Agency for International Development. I've also been, after leaving government service, a corporate executive in international development. And a few years ago, in my younger years, I was a Peace Corps volunteer where I served in the Dominican Republic.
And my name is Taylor Jack. Like Aaron, I was a former Peace Corps volunteer and I served in Senegal. I'm currently an international development practitioner at a government contractor for USAID, and I'm a public speaker on diversity and international affairs. Anybody in this industry, they have the travel bug. You can't sit still for too long before you're setting off on new horizons. And for me, I got that travel bug at 10 years old. My mom decided instead of, a party at Chuck E. Cheese or anything else, that we were going to Brazil for 2 weeks to learn more about the Afro-Brazilian diaspora in Sao Paulo, Salvador Bahia, and in Rio de Janeiro. So from that moment, being a young girl taken out of the south side of Chicago, I knew that my world was so much bigger and that I can reach any height that I set my eyes on. So if you haven't thought about a career internationally, I don't want the barriers of whether it's finances or traveling across the world to scare you, because it's one of the most exhilarating things you can ever do with your life.
Oh, my family was very supportive. They didn't even have a clue where Madagascar was. And at one point I remember my grandmother saying, well, you say you were in the Foreign Service, but I've never seen your uniform.
So Taylor, like you, I grew up in the south side of Chicago, in a working class neighborhood, working class family. And I never really even knew where the Dominican Republic was or what an ambassador did overseas. But when I joined the Peace Corps, it opened up doors for me that I never could have imagined.
For a long time, it was kind of not an option for African Americans in this country, because it's, the whole discussion of, especially Black grandmothers, why do you have to go all the way over there to do what you can do right here? And trying to explain the value of it to your family, sometimes it's like you're talking to a wall and you almost just have to show them.
For young people, young minorities, you have to be determined, because your family looks at this and they say, you're going to volunteer and not get paid, and there's no career that we can see. They don't understand that. Certainly I face the same thing, even more so. Fortunately, my mother was the only person who thought this was a good idea when I joined the Peace Corps. And I think what we are trying to do is to lay out an open door, a pathway, so that young people can determine why this is a good idea and how I can be successful when I pursue this career.
But, because I'm very purpose driven, I go back to, all right, this is not about me. This is about the mission that I'm trying to accomplish. And if I can kind of get myself off of me and onto what I'm trying to accomplish, I think it minimizes my own sense of self-doubt.
I think it's something that that people in my generation continue to struggle with, because oftentimes you don't see people of color getting tapped to be mentored or to have that sponsored or to be groomed for a position. You oftentimes see that it is our white colleagues that are being tapped upon or called upon to take on these roles that, quite frankly, they're not qualified to take. but because somebody rolled the dice and gambled on them, they are now moving up the ranks higher. But now you're starting to see, well, my peer is getting this intentional mentorship. They're being groomed for the next level. Their talent is being developed, so they're seen as more than just a number in that particular organization.
Oftentimes we shrink away from the opportunity. We step away from it because we're afraid of failure. And failure, we have to understand, is one of the greatest things you can really absolutely be engaged in order to move forward in your career, because you learn a lot when you fail. You learn a lot about yourself, you learn a lot about the situation that you're in at that moment in time, and you grow.
I really felt that I was not welcome. I was different. A lot of my colleagues came from Ivy League schools, and I didn't. And I was not as polished as some of them. But I decided early on that the Foreign Service had to take me or leave me as I am. And I think that that was probably the best decision that I ever made in my life, that I wanted to be myself, and I wanted to project myself and not try to be an image of somebody else that I thought would be more appropriate.
Authenticity is something that you work on every single day, because, you know, the work that you do in international affairs, it changes lives. Like, you know, it is so much more than who you are in this moment. And so you got to check that ego at the door. You have to check any type of biases or anything that is keeping you on this one specific agenda and taking you away from the ultimate goal. And in addition to having that network, I think, you know, despite what else is going on in the world, you just have to lean into that uncomfortability of just not always needing to please everyone. As long as you are being respectful in how you are presenting yourself or presenting whatever you are championing, and knowing that you are doing it with good intent, I think the rest will follow. Sometimes you have to be that person that's going to carry that tough flag, that somebody won't touch that issue. But you might be that special person that can bring it to the attention of others to actually to create change, and being almost relentless in a sense and unapologetic about who you are is so important, because at the end of the day, no one should be able to disparage your character if you're doing it with good intent. And what I found is that if somebody doesn't like the brand of who you are, there's 10 other people that's gonna buy it.
If you have great integrity, you will be known as a person of integrity, and that will become your brand. You will become authentic.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. This really was a labor of love, because I had a chance to interact with 35 plus giants, people who are leaders, diplomats, military, senior military officers, global corporate executives, heads of international NGOs, people who I recognize as being tremendous leaders. We dedicated this book to the distinguished, legendary Ambassador Edward Perkins, who was the first Black ambassador for the United States to the Republic of South Africa, and who was instrumental in dismantling apartheid in terms of U.S. foreign policy. He's no longer with us, but his spirit certainly lives on, and he was that type of courageous fighter that you're talking about. He certainly took on an enormously difficult task. He was very successful. Then went on to become the head of the Human Resources State Department as Director General. So I'm really glad that we were able to dedicate this to a man who represents everything that we believe is important and crucial and essential for being a giant. He certainly was a giant. I'm from the baby boomer generation. And the greatest generation, if you will, World War II veterans, they passed the torch to us and asked us to run with the torch to create a different and hopefully better world. And now we're at a juncture where your generation, we're passing the baton to you. I am very confident in the skill set and the dedication, determination, and the willingness to take on this challenge by this new generation. And so the book is going to give them a blueprint First of all, to encourage them to consider a career in global affairs, because other people just like them did it. They were successful and they have great ideas and experiences to share with them. Taylor, what a pleasure to be part of this process, this journey with you in writing this book. It's just wonderful that Professor Brinkerhoff and you and I were able to engage in this amazing exercise. It's really going to be one of the highlights of my career also.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Aaron, for welcoming me on the team so many years ago and allowing me to be a part of the gift that you're giving our generation.
We're delighted that you have an interest in global affairs, and we hope that this video and the book will inspire you to continue to engage in what can be a marvelous career that is so important to the future of America and the role that America plays in the world today.
Thank you for taking the time to view this video. We hope that you feel inspired and encouraged by what you read in the pages of this book and find yourself in it and find your place in American foreign policy.
All right, thank you, Dr. Brinkerhoff, for showing that video. I'll get back to our PowerPoint. So now we're going to move on to our Think, Pair, Share activity. So if you have your phone, please connect to the QR code here and you'll find an idea board asking 2 questions about your anxieties about joining a career in international affairs, or just any questions you might have about career in general that we will discuss in our coming conversation. So I'll give everyone a few minutes to hop onto idea boards, and then we'll hop over and look at the answers. Okay. So already I'm seeing some pretty interesting answers. What anxieties do you have about a career in international affairs, being away from family, being homesick, being afraid of the unknown, going to a country you've never been to before, safety concerns, too much movement. The code switching answer is also really interesting when it comes to being your authentic self. I feel like that's a thing that many people can relate to, and I've certainly related to in many of my internships. Making connections, networking is essential in international affairs. That's basically like what everyone says in DC, that your net worth is your network. So learning how to make those connections is also really important, but also really nerve-wracking if you don't know how to do it. Not smart enough, that's another interesting anxiety to have. It's definitely a big part of imposter syndrome, feeling like you're not even smart enough to be in the room with everyone else. I'll just give a few more minutes for people to send the responses, and then we'll start the conversation with General Price. Okay. Sounds like everyone's pretty much done, so I'll go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so you already got a little bit of General Price's bio from Samuel's amazing introduction, but I'll just recap quickly here. Major General Barrye L. Price, PhD, has held a distinguished career in the U.S. Army. I was very impressed reading his background. I honestly wasn't sure, should I call him Dr. Major General Price, but General Price is fine. He's CEO of the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, a nonprofit organization that's committed to creating safe, healthy, and drug-free communities globally. He's also been on the President and First Lady's task force on raising responsible and resourceful teenagers, and also served with President Clinton on his Mississippi Delta task force. He's a distinguished military graduate of the University of Houston's College of Business Administration. He earned a Master of Arts in History from Texas A&M and became the first African American to obtain a doctorate from the Department of History in that university's 104-year history, which I'm also very interested to learn more about as someone who's also applying for PhDs. That's causing me a lot of stress, but we'll talk about that. So I'll go ahead and open up the first few questions I have for General Price. So, General Price, in reading the responses on our idea boards, it seems a lot of students have anxiety about coming to spaces where they might not be familiar with the culture, where it might even be dangerous. How do you care for your mental health in intense or otherwise fast-paced environments, especially in the field of international affairs?
Well, let me first say thank you to you, Desiree, for being the hostess with the mostest, a wonderful person. I'm looking forward to this engagement with you. I want to thank Dr. Brinkerhoff for this invitation, and for Samuel and Mark and everybody who did work on this to bring this to fruition. Also want to thank the students from UCR School of Public Policy for this opportunity to engage you. I'm actually in the state of Oregon right now. Came out for an engagement today and head back home tonight, and then I head to Philippines on the next day. So how do I help work on the mental health? Well, I'm married to a psychiatrist, so that that helps a lot, right? But some of the things I tell you that I saw on the board or the chat, from the code switching to the imposter syndrome and how you might overcome that. And I tell you, as a military guy, imagine the challenges, because I was in charge. I wasn't just the new person, but I was also, the leader in most of the places that I found. And so there was a couple of things that I had with me that I brought with me from college, and I had a rich background in philosophy from my dad, but he gave me some tools and some thoughts and some quotes that I'll share with you that I think that's helped me tremendously. One is a quote by a guy named William Hazlitt, who spoke about example, and that we can never achieve any good or evil deed without producing others of the sort, and so that your example is very important. And then the second was from the neoclassical writer La Rochefoucauld, who spoke about how soon we acquire talents for positions of trust and importance. And the higher the situation, the higher the opinion it gives us of ourselves. And here's the important part: as is your confidence, so too shall be your capacity. And so one of the things, I'm first generation college in my family. I'm from Gary, Indiana, and a lot of things that I just jumped into life and faced, I just jumped in with both feet forward and faced them. And then again, I was a leader. And so we didn't have terms like imposter syndrome when I was a kid, but I faked it until I made it, is the piece that I would tell you. And eventually you'll find that you step into those roles because you see people around you who give you the tools and the necessary things that you need to grow in the positions that you'll hold.
Thank you for that answer. It's interesting how you mentioned about confidence. And some of the responses we also saw, some people don't even know where to start when it comes to building connections that become essential for getting a career in international affairs. How do you build that confidence, especially when you're trying to reach across the aisle or even above yourself
Yeah,
to make
right.
connections with people?
So sometimes it helps by reaching out to people that you wouldn't normally reach out to, people that you respect, i.e., your teachers, your professors, your counselors, adults in your community. Reach out to people that you wouldn't, because what that does, it gets you out of your natural comfort zone, and it pushes you in a direction that makes you become uncomfortable with comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so that's one of the easiest ways. And what you'll find is that your professors uh, have far greater reach than just teaching you in the classroom. They have networks. They can write recommendations. They can open doors for you. And this notion of mentorship, I think, is tremendously important. And so you should seek to align yourself with people who you love the way they're living, or you like the way that they present themselves or they carry themselves. And you should find yourself connecting with people like that because they'll sow seeds into you that I think will help you over the long haul.
Thank you for that, especially your advice about reaching out to professors. There's definitely such thing as learning outside of the classroom, and I
Right.
have professors as well. I've certainly gotten a lot of great advice from my professors. And speaking of, imposter syndrome and being the only one in the room, how do we navigate those situations of maybe being the only Black person or being the only woman in a certain space? What's like the best way to navigate that situation?
Yeah, so I think is that one, you have to accept it, that that's going to be your reality heretofore. I will tell you that oftentimes I was the only person who looked like me. He mentioned that I'm the first African American to get a PhD in history in 147 years of Texas A&M. Well, I was the only Black person in my class. I'm the only first Black to get a master's degree in the discipline of history from Texas A&M as well. So it's you got to be comfortable, in your own skin. And I tell you that trust trust the education and the knowledge and the upbringing that you have. Trust that your parents really wanted to set you apart and sent you to college to change your trajectory. That the trajectory of your family might be changed in the future, and so you're going to have to become comfortable with being, uncomfortable and placed in positions that you know nothing about. And I think that this notion of the importance of confidence, self-confidence, as he said, as is your confidence, so too shall be your capacity. And I think you have to embrace that.
Yes. Actually sounds very similar to what my father used to tell me growing up. He was in the Air Force, but he always used to say that he told me from a very young age that there will be times when you are the only person in the room. And that's just something that you will have to accept. And
Yeah,
really, you should see it as an advantage because if
yeah,
anything, it just makes you stand out more and it makes
yeah,
people remember.
yeah. And I wanna put just a little twist that my father gave me in that same vein. Is he said, when you get to these places and you recognize and you look to your left and right and you see no one who looks like you, don't think it's because you're so special. So don't become self-consumed and self-adulating. Uh, what to do? Don't crack the door open. He told me, and these are his words: take the damn door off the hinges. And so that's my plight. As I rise, as I reach, I lift as I climb. I reach back, and my plight is to take the door off the hinges. And I would ask others to do the same.
I really like that. And speaking of, we did just mention that you were the first African American to achieve a PhD from your department and university.
Mhm.
What are the other responsibilities of being a first, other than ripping that door off of its hinges?
So you know what's interesting. Uh, I didn't. I don't view myself as a pioneer of sorts. I think that I stand on the shoulders of giants, and many of the people that are discussed in this book. I mean, I really admire and look up to many of those heroes that are in the book. Helene Gale, Aaron Williams is a absolutely personal hero. He's a mentor. He's a friend. Alonzo Fulgham, same. And so I think that as long as we remember that it's sacrifices of those before us that provides the inroad for these opportunities for us. And then, oh, by the way, it's our job to pay it forward, by our success, and to make sure that we do the same that others did for us, to sacrifice and to lift, as we climb. And so that's the piece. But I don't really see myself as a pioneer. I really find it somewhat unbelievable that in 1997 I was the first, to receive a PhD from Texas A&M. This is a school of 60,000 people, and I'm still the only one to have obtained a doctorate, and the only African American in the history of that school.
Wow. So when we were talking earlier about code switching, somebody mentioned that was one of their anxieties about entering international affairs,
Right.
that constant need to feel like you have to sound a certain way or look or act a certain way in order to fit into certain environments. How do
Mhm.
we maintain our authenticity in these places? Is that
Yeah,
also part of confidence?
yeah, I think, yeah, I think it requires a great sense of self, and almost an inflated sense of self. Because one of the things that you find, if you're switching back and forth, you'll find that you won't even recognize yourself. And so I would tell you that your authentic self is good enough, that you're in the University of Cal Riverside School of Public Policy because you're supposed to be there. You're doing the work. You're making the grade. You're opening doors and avenues that will change the trajectory of your family. You're supposed to be there. And oh, by the way, if you speak with an accent, one of the things that I love to hear the accents of people, because I think when I hear an accent, I believe you bring your people with you. You bring your village with you. And so when you're present, your village, your tribe, your people are present with you. And I think that's your special sauce. Um, and so I would tell you that I wouldn't seek to change that. And I wouldn't seek to become something that you're not, because you'll be angry with yourself in the long run, and you'll find yourself not fitting in any environment, not even with yourself.
I really like that as well. Another anecdote my dad told me was when he entered the Air Force, uh, one of his advisors told him to get rid of his New York accent because he was from
Mm,
the Bronx. And he
yes.
said, if you keep that accent, no one's going to take you seriously.
Yeah.
So
Did
I'd
he
be
do that?
interested.
Did he do
Yeah,
that? Did he lose it?
he still has it a little bit, when he
Yeah.
gets angry,
Right.
but
Right.
it's gone for the most part, which is
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
kind of unfortunate now that you say that, accents are such a beautiful part of who we are and authenticity.
Yeah, I'm from the Midwest, and we're kind of known as the people with no accent. We don't sound like an East Coast person. We don't sound like a Southern person. We don't sound like a West Coast person. We're just kind of basic, bland. Like rice with no butter, right? That's the Midwest. Yeah.
Well, is Wisconsin separate from that? Because I feel like I can hear a little.
Wisconsin is kind of in that same vein. Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin are kind of in that same Midwestern Michigan, where there's really not a lot of accent to people.
Cool. So even let's say we don't have an accent and we're
Right.
still trying to remain ourselves authentically through, our personalities and our interests. And as we're
Mhm.
trying to make connections and maintain proper etiquette to get to where we want to be, how should we do that as young people as we are now? Like going into places and still being ourselves while still maintaining a good level of respect.
Yeah, I think the piece is that you've earned it, and sometimes my dad always said when you worry so much about other people's view of you, or don't be so concerned with someone else's circumstance that you lose sight of your own. And so, my family and my upbringing, we traveled a lot, and traveling to the 50 states or 38 of them by the time I was 12 and a half, Mexico and Canada, really gave me some insights into life in the world and other parts, of our country that nothing else would have exposed me to. And so when I was grown and when I went to college, I was very comfortable, in my own skin. I mean, and I think that's the comfort that we most need. And I tell you, if you want to know how you're doing, just ask your parents. If you want to know how different you are from previous generations, ask your parents. They'll tell you. Go back and visit old friends. You'll see how you are changing, and you'll see that the more you change, the less likely, the less you fit in environments of old, but it's really preparing you for those new environments that you'll go into. I will tell you all this too is that I'm the most successful person in my family, and so when I go back to Gary, I remain relatively quiet because my experiences no one else has really had them, and so it's a little lonely when I'm home because I can't really share because it might sound like I'm bragging, but no one else has really had the life or the experiences that I've had, and so um, being in the world and doing my job and leading people and being around people like the folk in this classroom is enriching for me.
Yeah, and speaking of that loneliness, I know you mentioned that you should go to your family and go back to your roots to, really reassert who you are and have that confidence with you. But what about when your family doesn't have any experience with that, like you said? And like one of the responses was going to a country that you know nothing about.
Right.
How do you adjust to that?
Yeah. So one of the things is that when I mentioned earlier that you bring your family with you. So every place that I've been, except for combat twice, Iraq and Kuwait, I've had my family come and visit, and hence they were able to see life through my lens. They were able to experience things in foreign lands, in Germany, in Africa, you know, uh, all of Europe. That I wouldn't, and then even in different places around the United States. And so it's great to go back home, but it's even greater when you bring home to where you are.
Does that always have to be family members? Can it be tokens or
Friends.
items?
It can be family members. It can be friends. It could be those people that you esteem and that esteem you. People that you enjoy spending time with, and who enjoy spending time with you. I would invite them into your new lives. It doesn't end with college graduation. That's not the last time they get to come and see you do something. They should now get to see the life that you're leading and experience that with you.
Okay. And speaking of family, how do you maintain a good work-life balance? And what are your strategies for establishing boundaries?
Yeah. So I became a parent for the first time. I was almost age 45, and so that the grind of and the hustle of life and being and becoming who I was going to become was almost done when my son was born. In fact, he was born when I was 45, almost 45, 2 months prior to being 45. I was a senior colonel, a brigade commander. I made 1 star when he was 2, my 2nd star when he was 4. And so he really was, and all of my peers, their kids were grown, and so having that young fella in my life and changing my life and kind of letting me know what was important really made the difference in my life. So,
And as you mentioned, you ascended through the ranks of the U.S. Army, I would say fairly quickly. How did your goals and responsibilities change within these promotions?
so this is interesting. Is that I thought I was gonna do the Army for 3 years and then get into politics. And my inroad to politics lost in 1988. And so I had to have a plan B. So I stayed in another tour, and which took me to Germany. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And so I'm going to stay in for 7 years. And then I went to graduate school to get a PhD. Then I went to West Point. And so I never believed that I was going to be in for more than 20 years. I wound up staying for 31. And the more I did, the more I got to do. And it exposed me to things like the White House Fellowship and the opportunity to meet heads of state and to meet cabinet members and to travel under the moniker of the White House. And again, as you learn, it increases your breadth and your width. It provided me opportunities to do things like right now in all of the Department of Defense, women can be a part of any specialty that exists. Well, I changed that. I did that when I was a 1 star, just by going to our chief of staff and saying, "Hey, you've seen women in as a colonel, as a 1 star, as a 2 star, as a 3 star, and a 4 star in Iraq. You've seen and I provided him with data and analysis of the expanded role that women had played. And in Iraq, there was no front lines and back lines, no rear echelons, and so we had this thing called the direct ground combat exclusion rule, which said that women could not be located or co-located with any units that were in direct ground combat. Well, in Iraq and Kuwait, I mean, in Afghanistan, after 9/11, there were no front lines and rear lines, and so I got him to agree to seek to repeal, to ask Congress to repeal the direct ground combat rule, and hence open all specialties in all schools to women. Uh, did I ever believe that would even be a possibility? No. But when I found out about it and I asked about it, I did some data, did some analysis, and so it changed for all of DoD, not just the Army. And so I tell you that, and that's what knowledge does for you. And that's what oftentimes service abroad does for you, is that it expands your reach and your capacity. And in many cases, you really have an opportunity to see our country through the lens of your foreign colleagues. And that was a life changer for me. Living abroad really changed my life.
And when we talk about how travel and education are just beneficial in so many ways,
Yeah.
and we also mentioned that education can also be outside of the classroom, what would you say that getting a PhD did for your career?
I tell you, I think the jury is still out on that. I received a PhD to teach at West Point, but I tell you that I learned, I became expert in a discipline and in an area, and so now, like for example, the events of January 6th, that's my research. the myth of the maddening crowd and how people respond when they're part of a collectivity, riots, and then the apparatus to control those things. And so it gave me a toolkit and an area of expertise and knowledge that is uniquely my own, that I can absolutely unequivocally say I am an expert on riots and what happens when people collect in a crowd, and how this notion of collective behavior takes on a role all its own.
That's really interesting because my focus in my graduate studies is actually about authoritarianism, and I'm
Okay.
writing my master's thesis on Russia and Belarus and how they treat political dissidents. And I'm
Mm.
hoping to continue this with my PhD, but in general, how important is it to be a sort of specialist? Is it better to be a specialist or to be a sort of jack of all trades?
Well, I tell you, when I think undergraduate school kind of builds you broad, right? You're taking all of these subjects, to build kind of a foundation, and it really shows you how to think. And your master's program, you become narrower and narrower as you get to the PhD, because it's about really depth of knowledge, when you become a master's student and a PhD student. And so
Ooh,
I think both are relevant, and I think you need to be both.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much, General Price, for having this conversation with me. I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. I believe they'll send them directly to Sam, right? Okay.
Yep. At this point, I would now like to bring up a select few public policy students from UCO for an audience Q&A. We'll also be accepting questions from a Zoom audience via the Zoom webinar Q&A box. Please submit your questions there instead of via the chat function. We'll also accept questions from in-person watch party here in California. If you have a question, please step up to the audience mic, and I will now hand it back to Desiree.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Okay. Joseph, if you want to go ahead and ask her.
You can go ahead and go to the mic in the middle.
Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. So my question is, and it'll be both to you, Desiree, as well as to you, General Price. What was that pivotal moment, or that moment of realization that specifically when it comes to public service, this is the route you wanted to take, and you wanted to serve your country through more of an international affairs lens, as opposed to domestically?
Yeah. For me, Joseph, I was on the border that separated East and West Germany on November the 9th of 1989. This is the day that freedom prevailed and the Iron Curtain, as we call it, fell. I was leading a foot patrol, off of OP Alpha in one sector of the East-West German border. And I saw all of these, and we received an intelligence briefing before, and nothing suggested anything that we were seeing. I mean, there were thousands of East German Trabants, these little 3-cylinder cars, lined up at the border. And we're wondering what's going on. Nothing told us that this was happening. Well, it turned out it was a mistake. They opened the borders, they opened the gates, and they couldn't get the genie back in the bottle. It wasn't supposed to happen. The East German government had not collapsed. It had not failed. But then they couldn't get the genie back in the bottle. That was, and being in Germany at that time and seeing how the West Germans embraced the Easterners, it just gave me so much hope. There was a time right outside of our barracks, we had this big, it's like the flag you see at football games, right? That very big flag hanging, and you had all these people who lived in East Germany just came to marvel at this American flag. And man, I tell you, it brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it. But that was that aha moment of how special it is to represent something larger than yourself. How special it was to be an American. Look, we have challenges as a nation, but there's nothing like us in the world. There's nothing like this country in the world. And this is why people will risk life and limb to get here. Yep, man, there's a lot of things I wish could be different, but there's nothing like it. And when you see it through the lens of a foreigner, who's only heard about it, never touched it, never felt it, never tasted it, it was just remarkable. So that moment for me, November 9th of 1989. I know none of you were born doing this, so don't say that. Don't tell me that, Desiree. All right.
Mine isn't nearly as interesting as General Price's, but mine also actually started in Germany because that's where I went to high school. Um, and growing up in Germany, you learn a lot, of course, about Nazi Germany, and the after effects of authoritarianism in Germany are still prevalent. People are still grappling with how to deal with that political history. And that was always very interesting to me. How does a democracy recover after being an authoritarian state? And then going to Hong Kong and seeing people fighting for democracy pretty much gave me the very same revelation as General Price, that people really do fight for democracy all over the world. And coming back to the States, working for internships on Capitol Hill, I volunteered with the Renewed Democracy Initiative and the U.S. Helsinki Commission, and I listened to all these dissidents coming from places like Iran, Venezuela, Syria, Turkey, Russia, Belarus, just talking about what they were doing to fight the dictatorships back at home. So that really inspired me to actually get involved with the understanding of authoritarianism and protecting democracy, not just in the United States, but abroad, where people are fighting to have their own right to decide their own lives. And then we have an in-person question.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a diverse student. I go to one of the most diverse, I think the most diverse UC. I live in an extremely diverse country, and we live in a diverse world. And so I'm wondering, with all these different viewpoints, all these different cultures intermingling, how do you get a truly representative idea, or even a country as diverse as ours? How do you understand everyone's perspective and come to a good solution that everyone can be happy with? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that with diversity, you come up with better solutions. You come up with challenging viewpoints that challenges conventional wisdom. I think that the more viewpoints you have, the better the final decision might be. This thing, I tell you, when you travel around the world and you really visit countries that are over 2,000 years old, United States is a baby, we're a puppy, and our democracy, it's the longest standing democracy, but it's very fragile. And one of the things that I think that's very important is that we have to exercise, the rights that's been given to us. There are people who die to vote, and we don't even exercise it. There are people who, based on class in a caste system, that they can never rise above their stature in life or their station in life. Um, that's not in our country. You can go from rags to riches. You can be Mark Zuckerberg if you're so inclined and you have the propensity and the knowledge to do that. This is the only place in the world that can happen. You could look at a place like Great Britain or England. The family of William's wife, Kate, who is I guess she's the William's wife is Kate, right? Is that right? Prince William's wife is Kate. Well, they were there. She's from a very wealthy family, but before she married him, they were considered commoners. because they hadn't been titled with uh, sir or ma'am or duke or duchess, and this only happens after she married William. That's not in our country. I mean, and I tell you that I really do believe that this is one of the few places in the world that you are really only limited by your own imagination, that your reach will always be further than your grasp. And I think that when you have a view of dissent, it's not a death penalty in our country. People die in Russia for even acknowledging what's going on in the Ukraine, that a war was going on, that they may have been wrong. And so I think that's a great question that you have, and I think diversity is our special sauce as a nation.
All right, we have one Q&A question from Melanie Lopez. Do you have any recommendations for those who are going into the military and want to work in government?
Yeah, I tell you that military life, immaterial of whether you come in enlisted, a warrant officer, as an officer, it moves you immediately from whatever station you are firmly into the middle class. I believe in this thing called OPM. You all know what that is? Other people's money, right? That all of my education, my bachelor's, my two masters, my PhD, the military, the government paid for all of it. It has changed my life. I'm from a family that has served. My fathers, my brothers, my uncles were all Marines. I'm the only soldier, and they asked me, well, why didn't I join the Marines? I told them because I didn't qualify. They told me that my head wouldn't fit in the jar and my IQ was too high. So that's why I'm not a Marine. That's a joke, everybody. So I hope you guys took that you received that as it was provided. But I think that government service is a wonderful life. It's a useful life. It's a worthy life, and it's a valuable life, and it's something that our nation needs. And so, for those of you who are looking at military or certainly looking at foreign service for our government, well done. I commend you for that.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
If there's anyone who has a question, please go ahead and walk up to the microphone.
I thought, is it Shahat who's on? I thought you had your hand up earlier. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Thank you so much. I would first like to say that you truly are exceptional and such a positive person, and it was really great to be here and listen to you speak today. And my question would be like, what are the most rewarding aspects for a career in the public service? Like, why should people be so drawn towards a career in international public service?
Yeah. That's a great question, and I want to thank you for your comments too. And I hope that somebody recorded this so I can take your comments specifically and share them with my wife. When you have an opportunity to serve something that's larger than yourself, to give to something that you can see legacy, like for example, I mentioned what I did to open up specialties to women in the Army. Last year, my university, a young lady was commissioned in the infantry, and she's the first one from my university, and I can say I did that. That's what government service provides. It provides a legacy that you can see the work that you've done, uh, infinitum. Well into the future. And so it was probably one of the more rewarding things that I've had an opportunity to do. I mean, it provides you an opportunity to do other things that you wouldn't otherwise have opportunity to do. When I was in Iraq, the last time I was over articles of the security agreement, and I was able to move from being a combatant in a foreign land to now supporting the Iraqi government as they began to build their state, right? And then I moved from being a soldier to being a servant, helping them to get their legs under them and helping them with import export, with entry exit. That import export are goods that are coming in and going out, giving them systems that we used to calibrate or to calculate or to determine what's inside of ships and containers that are on ships. Helping them with entry exit, that is people coming into their country and going out, to see that country get its legs back under them. It's something that, and oh, by the way, I hope someday my son will be able to go to Iraq and feel the same way that I feel about when I go to Korea, because my dad was a part of the Korean conflict. And so public service is a noble endeavor. And I think it's the gift that keeps giving.
All right. Well, that's the end of our event for today. Thank you so much, General Price, for joining us.
Thank you, Desiree. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. There is a link in the chat for an evaluation for our event, but I will also pull up the QR code for our evaluation in just a few seconds.
I also want to express, on behalf of the UCS School of Public Policy, a deepest gratitude to both General Barrye Price and Desiree for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us. Thank you as well to all of our audience members for being with us today. For those participating in the Spirit of Giving raffle, please check the Zoom chat for further instructions. You can learn more about events hosted by the UCS School of Public Policy by visiting our website at spp.ucl.edu. While you're there, you can also learn about our Master of Public Policy program and our official podcast, Policy Chats. Thank you for joining us. We wish you a great rest of your day and a wonderful holiday season ahead.
Thank you. God bless everybody.
Thank you.